The Lord of the Rings of Power, has finally aired amidst less than stellar reception. Right off the bat, I have pretty mixed feelings about the show. When viewed as a Tolkien adaptation, it's pretty terrible. But when viewed as a generic fantasy, there's some good stuff. I thought the way the Harfoots hide from the big folk is pretty clever, and honestly, a wizard showing up in a meteor is kind of cool. The only problem is that it would work better as an original fantasy rather than trying to pass itself off as a Tolkien adaptation. Admittedly, I also have some fairly mixed feelings about the dialogue and the writing. I'll admit, a guilty pleasure of mine is pretentious dialogue. The closer something is to sounding like Tolkien or Shakespeare, the more I enjoy it, both writing and reading it. The problem here was the dialogue felt like they were trying to match the sound and rhythm of Tolkien without really attempting to match the subtlety and the depth. There's some pretty dumb dialogue in here, and it's pretty clunky at times. Also, some of the visuals were quite good. The scene where the ship is about to enter Valinor I thought was pretty cool. Although, to be fair, I also love the twin suns scene in The Last Jedi, even though ultimately I hate what that scene means. The same thing goes for the Holdo maneuver in The Last Jedi. It's a beautiful shot, but it has some lore-breaking context. Sorry, I still feel kind of burned by The Last Jedi. I do have to admit, though, I think the Rings of Power, in terms of entertainment, is better than anything that Marvel and Star Wars are currently putting out. The acting in the show is fairly forgettable. I was actually surprised that Durin and Disa were the best characters in the show, followed somewhat behind by Elrond. I thought he was fine. However, Galadriel was extremely unlikable, and of the two female hobbits that we're introduced to, who are essentially female Frodo and female Sam is extremely unlikable in my opinion. To be honest though, I didn't hate these episodes, but I didn't love them either. The same thing is true of The Last Jedi. I didn't initially hate The Last Jedi, although something felt off when I got out of the theater. And something feels off about the Rings of Power as well. And like The Last Jedi, I may grow to hate it. Or it may grow on me. Time will tell. I really want to like this show because it's more of Middle-earth. But I also don't want to like it because it's clearly not Tolkien's story, but rather an expensive fan fiction that may tangentially touch on some of the events of the Second Age. The pacing was also kind of rough. Ultimately, in 2 episodes, after 2 hours of storytelling, there has been very little, next to nothing in fact, that could be called an emotional response. I did not have much of an emotional response from this show. The most emotion I felt in these 2 hours was a brief smile and a little bit of a chill with soaring music and the visuals of seeing Khazad-dûm at the height of its power. I wasn't angry as I watched the episodes, as I thought I would be given the lore-breaking things that I was seeing. Although I did find myself frowning quite a bit throughout the experience. For the most part, I didn't feel much, though. I already knew what the show was going to be. Amazon showed us quite plainly in the promotional material. Less of a focus on adapting Tolkien's Second Age, either directly or the spirit of the story, and more using the popularity of Jackson's films to catapult the show into popularity, which would also allow them to push the message that Hollywood is currently pushing, which may die and fade with time. We just don't know yet. Unfortunately for Amazon, Tolkien fans tend to be extraordinarily well-read, due to the immensely difficult yet rewarding text. That is the Professor's Legendarium. And since Tolkien fans are well-read, as a whole they will not accept anything that is not excellent, which unfortunately this show is not. Good visuals and a good musical score mean very little if the writing and the acting are found lacking. While not horrendous at first glance, the writing and acting is at best forgettable and lackluster for the majority of the viewing experience. Upon reflection, the writing and acting can border on bad, reflecting the quality of shows on the CW. Like some of those shows, The Rings of Power is at times enjoyable despite being low quality where it matters. Ultimately, I'm going to try to look at the show in two ways. First as a generic fantasy, and second as an adaptation of the lore. Right now, if I look at the show as a generic fantasy that draws inspiration from Tolkien, then The Rings of Power is hovering at a 5 or 6 out of 10. About average. There are some things here that I like for a fantasy story. Most of it doesn't work well in a Tolkien adaptation, though. However, when looked at as an adaptation of the Second Age, and compared to the source material, it's a 1 or a 2 out of 10. It's pretty much an abomination, as I mentioned. Amazon did not get with the page on this one. The show might tangentially touch on some other elements of the lore, like the forging of the rings and the fall of Numenor, but doing so by butchering all the material in between, just as they butchered the Wheel of Time. I think anyone who dislikes the show on the basis of lore adherence is well within their rights. I will keep watching the show, if for no other reason than to review it. I'll try to put out another review for episode 3 fairly soon. I'll also be working on reviews for The House of the Dragon, which I think is a better show than The Rings of Power in almost every way. Until next time, thank you very much for watching, and get with the page.